Hello and welcome to Ask MotorInc. I hope you're able to keep up with the barrage of MotorInc first that Karthikeya and I have had to record because the run-up to Diwali has been so busy. I think there's at least a couple of episodes that will not make it to YouTube because there's just not enough space. They are free to watch on the app as usual, so you should check them out there. If you're on the app and you haven't checked out Circles, you should. I think it feels like the best of forums and social media networks. And from there, we're doing Ask MotorInc, which is people asking questions about stuff that they have doubts about, are struggling with. And what I really enjoy about Circles is the community has owners who have perspectives, experienced people who have perspective, and youngsters who have different perspectives. And it's a collaborative effort to see if we can't find a solution. We pick some of those questions and we bring them here to this video. For example, here's a regular member of our community, Sairam Miriala, who is asking, what is an embargo for? And why would they put a specific date and time? So the embargo was invented as the idea saying, when you had 5 journalists arrive to drive a car or ride a bike, it was easy for you to say, okay, release your videos whenever you're ready. But when that number gets larger and larger and larger, and often today, I remember I was at the TVS Orbiter launch, and on my day, there were 38 people, and I was on day 2 of 3. So let's assume that they'd called 100 people over the 3-day period to experience the Orbiter and make their content on it. It would be unfair for the person who rode the Orbiter last to not have as much time, or at least a reasonable amount of time, to release their content versus the first person to ride the Orbiter in this group. That's what the embargo in the first place does. Second, because the embargo has a specific date and time, the manufacturer is able to exert control over what content shows up when, which they do use in a number of ways. For example, you have embargoes today that says walkarounds only, which means on that particular date and time, a whole bunch of brands will just have walkarounds. But at the same time, you've got the first wave of content, which is, this is what the bike does, and you're walking around the bike or car. The next wave then could be the first ride event and the coverage of that, which is usually done on the same day in many cases, but that embargo is later, and that gives them a second push of content, which means a second wave of videos arrive on YouTube, for example. So an embargo is a way to organize information and schedule. Information for the manufacturer can be a very powerful marketing tool as they build out the story of this vehicle. You should know that 20 years ago, you would get an invitation, you'd get the vehicle, and that would be the end of that. Today, they string things out. So you will have for example, with cars, it gets really complicated because they'll show you the camouflaged car first, then they'll do the teaser for the car second, then they will do the unveil event for the car, then they'll do the price event for the car, and then you'll actually see the car, and then you'll have the first embargo for the walk around, then you'll have the second embargo for the first ride, and so on and so forth. Manufacturers today also put embargoes in some cases where they say you can do the walk around on this date, you can do the first drive or ride on this date, but you will not do comparisons before this date to give this product breathing room before you start comparing it to products. And this is just how it works. To me, it is possible to manipulate the messaging about a vehicle using embargoes, but typically, first of all, it's a logistic solution, not anything else. If I were making a motorcycle and I had the capacity to handle 100 or 1,000 media houses on the same day, maybe I won't need an embargo at all, but that is just physically impossible to do. The second part is, do brands check what you're posting before the embargo? I have never encountered this. In the case of MotorInc First, for example, we never really meet the embargo in the first place. We're usually at least a week behind the embargo, so it doesn't affect us much. But the only time we go back to the manufacturer is, I got back home and we have to record MotorInc First tomorrow, and I had 3 questions that I think Karthikeya will ask and I don't have clear answers for. Can you help me clarify this information? This is the kind of back and forth that I do think happens with manufacturing, and it's a good thing because your information becomes clearer. But I can't remember in my group of friends who work as journalists who have sent information back to the manufacturer to validate that this is okay to post before embargo. One of the things we did very consciously with MotorInc First was to say, we are not going to try and meet the embargo. We are not going to try and rush the stories out, so that we are absolutely sure of what we thought happened. We have a chance to cross-question, to ask for more information, to ask for more clarification if required, before we say, yes, okay, now we know exactly what happened and why it happened and what their logic was, and then present that picture to you. We've also cancelled MotorInc First episodes of vehicles we've driven or ridden because it just became too long and the information never completed. To give you one old example, the Hero Destiny 125, the price came so late, there was no point doing it. Suzuki E-Access, I have tested the scooter, I have opinions about the scooter, there's lots of interesting stuff there to discuss. Until they give us a price, we can't do it, and now we are approaching the point where we say, Suzuki, send us the E-Access, we'll do a view story, there is no MotorInc First coming. And that's how embargoes work. Next, we have Sambit, and he is asking, He's looking forward to buy a pair of fog lights for his Hero Extreme 125R. Is it necessary to use wiring harness kit, or can he just connect the light directly to the battery with some good quality wire and switch? He's seen videos on YouTube that where some say that's actually okay and others say that it is not. It's very confusing. Please explain about the wiring harness kit, its use case, pros and cons. So first, let's understand the rules about fog lights so that this is clear. I know we've done this before. We'll do it again and again because this can get confusing. One, fog lights must be mounted under the level of the headlight. They cannot be mounted above the level of the headlight. For legal purposes, usually the markings and the measurements come from the center point of the headlight. Just remember this. Second, your fog light has to be covered during the day, which means it has to have some sort of blackout cover on it. The rule does not specify whether it has to be rubber or metal or cloth or anything, but the lenses of the fog light should not be visible during the day is a clear part of the law. And third, this is an old law. It's very difficult to measure it and implement it as it was written in intent, but you're supposed to have lower wattage in the fog lights than in the headlights, which in today's day and age, we've moved from incandescent bulbs to halogen to HID to LED. So this is really hard to enforce. And most policemen do not look at the wattage of your aux lights. They first talk about the fact that you have aux lights and that's illegal, and the only way you have to get around it, below the headlight and covered during the day. Now, when you're mounting auxiliary lights to a motorcycle, the reason why you want to pay attention to the wiring is because the manufacturer validates the entirety of the electrical system of the motorcycle. But when you're mounting a relatively inexpensive fog light, and I'm saying inexpensive because you have a Hero Extreme 125R, it doesn't make sense to me that you'll buy a bike worth, let's call it a lakh 30, lakh 40, and then put a 40,000 rupee auxiliary light on it. If you're buying a 8-10,000 rupee auxiliary light, that's the quality that you've bought. It's probably sourced from China, whatever the brand on the light is, and that means the quality of that piece of equipment itself is unknown. If you connect it to a dodgy piece of wiring, then you don't know if the wiring will carry the load or not, and that can cause all sorts of electrical problems. To me, I would always wire the light direct to the battery. It's how I have mounted all the lights on all of the motorcycles I've ever mounted, because that means the motorcycle's electrical system is not connected in any way to the LED light. And if the motorcycle malfunctions, the lights aren't affected. If the light malfunctions for any reason, the motorcycle is not affected. There's only one crossover point, which is there is something called a relay, sometimes called a cutout, and the cutout has to know somehow that the motorcycle has switched on or not. If you don't have a relay, effectively you can put it in a parking lot and somebody could turn your light on, and when you come back it would have drained your battery. For that reason, motorcycles specifically, you have a relay or a cutout, and to this relay or cutout you will usually have to draw a wire that lets you know that the motorcycle has been switched on or not. And there is a whole bunch of ways to do this. The smartest way to do this is, if you have a motorcycle with an accessory port anywhere, connect the wire from the accessory port to the relay, and this is how I would solve it. So to me, the simple answer is, you always connect the power to the lights through the battery, and you always have the relay tell the light that the bike is switched on right now or switched off right now, so that it can be operated only when the motorcycle is on. As far as the wiring is concerned, please do not cheap out. I do not believe that the difference in cost between a purpose-made high-quality harness and good wiring that you've sourced yourself will be significant, but the peace of mind knowing that you bought something expensive, high quality, and then never have to think about it, that's a huge saving. The second thing you should remember is harnesses are universal, which means you can take this harness from your Hero Extreme 125R 5 years from now and take it to your next motorcycle if you've mounted it correctly and it has not been damaged or cut or torn up in any way in use, and you can keep reusing the harness. Do not cheap out on wiring. When wiring goes bad and starts to fry electricals on your motorcycle, it's an absolute pain to diagnose what went wrong, how much to replace. Eventually they'll tell you we'll have to change the whole loom, and that's just an absolute pain in the ass. That is not worth whatever saving you're aiming for. Unad Sam has a question about oil changes. This is specific to his Duke 250 in some ways, but I think this is also a general question that I have seen elsewhere on Circle, so we're not going to keep it specific to his motorcycle. And what he's asking is, he did his first service and oil change on the 10th of June. Next service is due, according to his meters, on the 25th of October. When will the next oil change happen? First, this is not a guesswork question. In the KTM's case, I'm aware that the app has a copy of the manual. For most of the other brands who do a better job than KTM at this, you can download the manual. When your oil is to be changed is noted down on the scheduled maintenance chart in your manual. Please do look it up. It's a very precise and well explained thing. There is no mystery to it. There is no guesswork. The reason why this question is common is actually the next part. He says the bike is currently at 4,000 kilometers. That's about 3,200 kilometers since the last service, but he has done 2 long rides, 2,700 kilometers in total in that duration, and he's planning another ride between 2nd and 4th of October. That's 1,200 more kilometers. He specified what fuel he uses. That's completely relevant to this question. And his question is, KTM recommends oil changes every 7,500 kilometers. So should he change the oil now before his long test ride, or will it be okay for him to wait for the next month's service and changes at that point? His concern, and here's the real thing, is on the long rides, he's sitting at reasonably higher speeds, 80 to 120 kilometers per hour for long durations. And he is worried that it affects oil quality, and he wants to understand what to do. And to me, the answer is this. You do not need to think about the oil on your motorcycle in terms of quality. It is designed to do a job and to last a specified interval, which in this particular case is documented as 7,500 kilometers. And to me, this is the amount of brain I'm willing to use for my oils. The oil is supposed to last 7,500 kilometers, and in experience, it does. If the oil deteriorates a little bit towards the end, does it fundamentally drastically affect your motorcycle in any long-term way? Honestly, it does not. The only thing I would say here is this. If I'm going for a ride which is so long that it goes beyond my service interval, that's the situation where I would say, no, I want fresh oil in my bike. We'll deal with the service issue later and then come back and see where you're at. And this actually happened when I took my KTM to the racetrack a few months ago, where I was at that situation where I was 2,000 kilometers from service, but I was going 3,000 kilometers in total. So what I did was I moved the oil change up. I simply went to the dealer and I said, look, it's not ready for second service, but since I'm here and I'm going for a long trip, can you, instead of servicing it, just change my oil and change my air filter, and we will deal with this motorcycle when I come back from my trip. I went into the trip knowing that I had fresh brake pads. My oil was reasonably fresh and topped up. My brake fluid was okay, and that my tires were okay, etc., etc. And I didn't worry about service till I returned. When I came back, I still haven't gone to service yet, because my second service was logged at that point, and I now know that given the fact that I've now done 4,000 more kilometers on this bike, the air filter probably needs a change, the oil level looks okay, and I have just not bothered to see anything more than this. So to me, please stop worrying about your oils. They're designed to do a job. Most oils today do an excellent job of what they're supposed to do, and the service interval is all you need to be aware of. All of the rest of the worrying is just not required. This is a good question, and this question will come a lot because we are not getting equipment for motorcyclists as easily as we used to as we transition into a new phase of BIS certification for boots. And Rajdeep actually says he's decided to go all in for motocross boots. He's basically been watching MotorInc, and we've inspired him to do this, it appears. And he's decided on the Alpinestars Tech 10, which is Alpinestars top off-road motocross boot. The problem is he's getting them in Mumbai for a price of 70,000 rupees, and on a website called MotoStorm, it's about 44,000 rupees. He's asking which one is genuine. Should he buy online or go to the store to try it first? And he's saying he lives in a tier 2 city. There are no good dealers for motocross boots. So for trying, he has to make a round trip to either Mumbai or Bengaluru, and he's saying that's not feasible. 3 or 4 things to unpack here. One, if you've never worn a pair of motocross boots, I think they are such stiff boots that for motocross boots specifically, and top of the line race boots also, it is worth making the trip to check the boot out for yourself physically to make sure the size is correct. Because if you buy a relatively flexible motorcycle boot, which means the protection isn't super top grade, it is a flexible boot. And if you're a little bit between sizes, you can get around it. But if the boot is super stiff, as a motocross boot would be, it basically says this is the amount of space I'm going to give you, and if it doesn't fit you exactly, there is no change that is going to happen to boot as you live with it. What we say a boot breaks in is that the joints on the boot, which are designed to not move, they start moving in ways that you accept as normal, and that is the break-in phase. It's not like the boot becomes a little bit more spacious or anything. That's not what these boots do. So Rajdeep, I would tell you, I know it sounds like a difficult thing to go to Mumbai or Bengaluru just to check the boot out. Find other things to do in those cities, and do go check the boots out, at least for your first motocross boot purchase. Second, whether it is genuine or not, you can establish by going to Alpinestars website and looking at who the dealers are. Alpinestars International will list dealers in each country, or at least importers in each country. You will get a number or email address of the importer of Alpinestars here. You can reach out to them and say, this person in this city is offering me a deal on an Alpinestars boot. Are they legit? Are they your official representative? And you will get a clear, unequivocal answer. Point number 3, when you're looking at MotoStorm and you're finding these boots at 44,000 rupees, do remember that you will pay customs duty on the way in, and that is usually around 40% more. So by the time it comes to your house with shipping and everything included, I would be very surprised if it is not 70,000 rupees again. I know for a fact that a lot of people who import international gear into India as official representatives, they do benchmark prices online as the final landed India price, and usually there will not be more than 2, 3, 4,000 rupees of difference in what you bought there plus customs and shipping and what you bought here directly from them. And to me, in this event, I would rather buy from the Indian people because they have made the effort to make sure this product is available here than import it from there and save these 2,000-3,000 rupees, because it encourages them to bring wider product ranges, and they are your first line of support when something goes wrong. Whereas if you get it from MotorStorm, think about it. Let's say you buy this boot from MotorStorm, you ride it for 10 days and the sole falls off. Why should the Alpinestars India representative be extra helpful to you because you're an Alpinestars customer is a decision that person will make. But if you bought it from them, it is more contingent on them to help you. And let's say that it goes into a bad place and you have to go to consumer court. You have a bill from this person. Good luck trying to sue an Italian website because your shoe sole fell off. It just becomes more and more complicated. So to me, I deal with brands like SW Motec, which is represented by Big Bad Bikes. And as I said before, I know the people there really well. Even if I see a 3,000 rupee advantage on SW Motec Germany's website plus customs and shipping, I would just rather buy from them because I know their customer support is excellent. This is how I would approach this. So 2 takeaways: motocross boots, specifically stiff boots, please do try before you buy, as inconvenient as that sounds. And 2, don't look at the low price and say, I am done. Think about the fact that you'll pay at least 40% more for customs and then shipping, and it might come exactly to the same thing again. Ankit, with a lot of ease in his username, is asking, is chain rust buildup more common than what he's thinking it to be? Because he's panicking and cursing his fate, saying, why only me? Look, Ankit, if you choose to worry about everything and anything, there is no end to it. This is a huge rabbit hole and you can keep going down this rabbit hole as far as you want. What we need to understand is, where is the rust and how does it affect us, right? So the outside plates of the chain, if they have rust on it, it's not the prettiest thing to look at, right? But KTM does sell orange colored chains, which are obviously not rusted, but they go with their brand color. There are also gold color chains, and one of the reasons why the gold color is important is because the gold color represents the fact that the plate, which is usually rusty iron, in terms of rustable iron, that plate has been anodized or coated in some other way to look golden, and in the process prevent the surface rust from happening. So first, if the outer plates of your chain is rusting, it can represent a lower quality chain, maybe. It can represent a little bit of lack of care from your part in terms of keeping your chain clean, etc. But it doesn't affect the functioning of the chain in any significant way, because the moving part of the chain that really makes a difference are the rollers, the lubrication within the rollers, and the O-ring seals that are there to keep the lubrication in the rollers and not come out. And what we're trying to make sure with lubrication and cleaning is that those parts work really well. So if you neglect it, for example, I am on a 10-day trip and therefore I don't have the time to clean and lube my chain. And honestly, if I were on a 10-day trip, I would not look at my chain until it became too loose. I do not lube my chains on trips. I do not clean my chains on trips. I will only look at the tension on the chain, and I want to keep that on top, because sealed chains, O-ring, X-ring, whatever it is, sealed chains are designed to run with the lubricant that is inside the chain. I'm doing the exterior work to make sure that that stays okay. From that scenario, this is something absolutely not worth worrying about. If you do have chain rust happening, it'll probably be on the outer plate. It is a cosmetic thing. It doesn't affect anything in any significant way. And take a wire brush and clean that part out. Be very, very careful with wire brushes. You don't want to cut the O-ring seals that are holding the actual lubrication of the chain inside. Outside of that, this is not actually a big problem. Okay, I think that's been a long enough episode. We have tons more questions and we'll come back with another episode of Ask MotorInc to answer those. Thank you so much for watching. If you do have questions and you're about to leave us a comment, please know that we pick questions from MotorInc circles and we look for the hashtag Ask MotorInc to find those questions in the first place. If you do go to circles and post your questions, what will surprise you is before we can answer your questions, you will find perspective, answers, opinion and help from other people in the MotorInc fam who are absolutely awesome. A, for helping, and B, for how much knowledge and sensitivity they bring to these subjects. So to me, if you're not on circles, I know there is a podcast episode that says this is not real, but you are missing out, I promise. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Ask Motoring. Karthikeya will see you next week, and I will see you again the week after that.